Hi everyone. Happy Friday. Today is Feedback Friday, and this is where we pause at the end of the week and really just reflect on feedback and what we can learn from it. My name is Dr. Shanita Williams, and for those of you I have not had a chance to meet, you know that I am a feedback enthusiast and someone who really feels that feedback is the key to unlocking and unleashing your potential. One of the things that I'm really honestly proud about is that for the past 3 years, I've been working on my book, and it'll be officially available for pre-sale here soon, October 25th. I'll be hosting my launch party, and I'm just so proud of that because I had to work through a lot of personal feedback in order to get to this place. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I honestly delayed a lot of my work because I quite honestly judged myself harshly on whether or not it was even worthy to be introduced to the world. I judged myself harshly on whether or not it was valuable. I judged my writing heavily. And so when I think about where I am in this moment and saying that I'm officially releasing a book to the world, this is crazy, insane. Know that I do it, but I had to work through a lot of personal feedback that I gave myself along the way in order to write this book about feedback. Can you imagine that? So I wanted to spend today to talk about that idea of perfectionism. Can any of you relate to that? I mean, anybody a perfectionist? And sometimes it's hard to admit, but I'll be honest, I am a perfectionist. And I'll tell you, it serves me well most times because I spend my time reviewing things, digging in, and making sure I got it just right. But I read an article by, let me see his name here, Travis Bradberry. Yes, many of you may know him. I love all of his articles. But he talked about perfectionism and really how can you identify when your perfectionism is out of control? Have any of you ever had out of control perfectionism? Let's be real, right? Like, who wants to walk in the world and actually have mistakes just showing up everywhere? I know I don't. And so I am always evaluating myself, challenging myself, critiquing myself. And it's really, really hard. One of you just said, mixed chicks. I also am a perfectionist, and it's a love-hate relationship. You got it. It is. Like, I love it because it keeps me honest and humble. And it's like, no, Shanita, it's not good enough. But it is so tough, I tell you, on the psyche. Now, there was actually some research done by the University of British Columbia, as well as the University of Tehran. And what they found was that perfectionism actually comes with some challenges that we should be thinking about. It actually comes with, we're at greater risk of, depression, anxiety, as well as, additional mental health issues. When I think about this, and if I was really honest with myself, sometimes I have been so hard on myself as a perfectionist that I've kind of spun myself out a little bit, that I've gotten sad about something before I even released it to the world or before I even finished it. Has that ever happened to you guys? Where, like, no matter what you did or how hard you worked, you still weren't satisfied with what you put out there? Like, one mistake could send you out of this hard work, could send you out into a spin. And that's why I was sharing with you guys, the journey to launching Feedback Mentality, the book, was so challenging for me as a perfectionist because I would sit sometimes and just look at my same sentence over and over. Well, that's not how you say that. There's a better way to say that. I mean, goodness, Shanita. But I'm so proud that I was able to work through my perfectionism because sometimes, oh yes, love, strength, and blessings. You said perfectionism leads to procrastination for you. Absolutely. I can wholeheartedly agree with that. I found that I was delaying things because I was so focused on getting things right in my mind that it often delayed my ability to act, to move. So I don't know if you guys can relate to that. But I wanted to spend the time talking about perfectionism just so that all our perfectionists, in the room could feel like, one, you're not alone, but two, we could start to think about how do we look at the signs and symptoms of when they spiral out of control. And that's what Travis Bradberry's article talked about. And he gave eight things to look for. Now, I wanted to share 4 of them with you because they really landed with me. And I really, really feel like they just hit home for me. So I'm going to share kind of some pieces from his article that resonated with me, and hopefully it'll resonate with you. The first one is, he talked about fear of rejection. How many of you fear being rejected? I think we all want to be accepted and included in everything, right? No one wants to be like, I think about Forrest Gump. He got on the bus and he said, "Is this seat taken?" And it's like, yeah, this seat's taken. Can I sit with you? And I think we have this natural desire to belong to something, right? And so when you're working on something and you want to put a part of yourself out in the world, sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, this part of me might get rejected. And that's not easy to just walk confidently into. And so for those perfectionists out there, if you ever fear rejection, please let me know. It is something that I definitely work through. And oftentimes it comes from this place of this need of approval. Have you ever felt like you just want someone to validate you? And I'll be honest with you, even when I wrote this book, I don't know how many times I sent snippets to people. My husband knows the book by heart because I was like, well, let me read this to you. Does this make sense? And I needed to hear him say yes, to kind of validate that, yes, I hear you, I see you. And Oprah Winfrey talks about this. She said she had a disease to please. And she talked about how when she was in college and actually her broadcasting career was budding, and how she couldn't get involved in a lot of the campus activities. And she felt like she had a different life because she was, I think, broadcasting from she went in at 2 p.m. until late at night, and that she wasn't as connected to her friends, and that her friends, were like, oh, you're big time now, because she had this great job in college. And that I think she mentioned she would buy pizza. She felt the need to say oh no, I'm not too big, I'm not too disconnected. This need for approval of just belonging is a really interesting phenomenon to dissect. So fear of rejection. So if you find yourself spinning in that and find that you are not able to move forward because you're afraid that whatever it is you're about to present to the world might not be accepted or rejected, you know that your perfectionism is getting a little in your way. And I'll be honest, that was part of my journey in writing this book. I'll also tell you, I just started doing IG lives because I was like, what if I say things and no one comes on, or no one can relate, or I sound silly? I had to work through that, and I'm like, whatever. If people don't want to watch it, that's hard to say. If people don't want to watch it or they don't get it, that's okay. But I'm working through that, and I hope that just my example will help encourage you if there's something that you have fear of rejection of. The other thing he talked about in the article was about taking mistakes personally. Ooh, and that hit home, let me tell you. Have you ever made a small mistake, but you ruminated on it like it was a big mistake? I gotta tell you, that happened to me. It happened to me so many times in my life where maybe I prepared a huge presentation and you do it. It's an 8-hour training, maybe. The day feels like magic, but you get to that point where someone gives you some feedback and they're like, oh, it was great. Oh, but on slide 4, you had a typo. And then you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had a typo. And you spin in your head about that. Has that ever happened to you? Mixed Chicks said yes all the time, right? So it's so interesting that as a perfectionist, because we have this quest for success and we have this yardstick. I don't know about you. I have this yardstick I have with me every day of how I should be measuring up. And I'm checking in with myself each day, all day, saying, oh, no, you're not good enough yet. Keep trying, keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. The second that mistake is shared, whether it's big or small will spin me out sometimes. So I have to control that. So if you find yourself in a space where you are spiraling, check yourself and just go, okay, how big is this mistake in the grand scheme of things? And then focus on the learning, which you guys know I'll have a whole nother IG talk about that, because feedback is all about learning. And really, mistakes are the stepping stones to that learning. So sometimes the narrative that's attached with that is, I'm not good enough. Have you ever said that to yourself? I think if we were to be honest, we've all said that. And so you want to make sure that you catch that narrative, because when you stay in that space of I'm not good enough, and I think that's where the anxiety and the depression come in, because then you don't feel valued. And oftentimes it's not from other people. We are our hardest critics. I know I'm my worst critic. Someone gave me some positive feedback today about something, and I thought I did terrible. Honestly, I was like, oh gosh, I should have said this. Why did I say that? And someone said, hey, brilliant. That was a great comment. And I was like, really? I thought it didn't make any sense. So it's so interesting that catching that narrative of I'm not good enough, especially as a perfectionist, is really, really important. The third thing, and I think someone already mentioned it, was procrastination. Procrastination is interesting when you're a perfectionist. It's when you think about it, it's when those like everyday tasks become like very difficult to do. Have you ever felt that way, where it's like, oh, I just have to send an email, but it's like, oh, what am I gonna say and how am I gonna? You spend all this time and you're like, at the end of the day, it's like, it's just an email, Shanita. How are you making the easiest thing become so complex because of that innate nature to make sure that it is perfect? And so I saw someone already say it's that fear of failure. Like, what if I get it wrong? What if I say the wrong thing? And again, we have to lean into that fear of failure and know that risk taking and that failure is really learning, and just kind of changing the narrative and saying it's not failure, it's actually learning. I'm learning today. If we can lean into that, that'll help us with our perfectionism mindset. The fourth and final thing that I took from his article, you got to read the full article because it's actually 8 things he gives. But the fourth one that really resonated with me was, that your perfectionism is out of control if you get defensive with feedback. Here comes feedback mentality. And it almost is linked to some of what I mentioned earlier. It's when you're working so hard and, as a perfectionist, you try to comb through and cross every T, dot every I. You try to think through every possible option, and then that person comes in with that one thing for you, and you're like, oh, what, how could I get here? How could I get to this place? And so you try to defend yourself of like, no, but I thought through that, and this is what I meant, and trying to explain yourself. And honestly, that defensiveness really takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of toll on you, and it feels like it activates that flight or fight response, where your brain is telling you, oh, you need to defend yourself, you need to protect yourself, and that takes a lot of energy. You don't have to protect yourself from feedback. You can just listen to it. I'm going to talk to you guys later, and you'll find in my book, I talk about a strainer mentality versus a sponge mentality. How do you, with a strainer mentality, you take it in, you can hear it, but you don't hold on to everything. Just like a strainer, some things you let go. And so with that defensiveness, it's important for you to really think about like, whoa, what's triggering me? And it might be that perfectionist in you looking at your yardstick and taking their feedback and saying, wow, I thought I was here and they gave me feedback and now I'm down here and I don't like that feeling, and no one wants that feeling. But really leaning into that and exploring that is really powerful. So yes, I will put the link to the article in the comments when the slide is over. Travis Bradberry, really, really great article to learn from. So one of the things that was suggested in the article too that you guys are going to love, they said, well, we should probably move from being a perfectionist to an optimalist, where you are definitely still working hard. Working for success is not a bad thing. Challenging yourself to get to greatness is not a bad thing at all. But changing it from perfectionist to optimalist gives you a little bit more flexibility and opportunity for you to rebound after some of those challenging things. Because as a perfectionist, I'll be honest, sometimes that rebound time is a lot longer than it has to be because we sit in it a little longer than we should, right? And that's where we spiral and can kind of really derail ourselves from really, to me, walking in your purpose, because you start questioning things more often. So I love that mindset, switching from perfectionist to optimalist. And, honestly, this last little quote I'll share with you guys really summed it up for me. Kerry Washington, I love her. She is amazing. Olivia Pope is just my alter ego. I love her. But she left this quote that really, it's actually on my IG. You'll see a copy of this quote. And it says, I realized that I didn't have to be perfect. All I have to do is show up and enjoy the messy, imperfect, and beautiful journey of my life. Just sit in that. I love that. So, guys, to my fellow perfectionists out there, I'm talking to myself, and I see that we have a community of you out there as well. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to show up. We just have to step in the arena, right? Like Brene Brown will say, step in the arena. Some people aren't stepping in the arena, putting themselves out there, trying new things. Just show up and enjoy this beautiful, messy, imperfect journey that it is. So I hope that this was beneficial for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back next week with some updates on the progress of the book, as well as some updates and new articles perhaps I read around feedback. So thank you guys so much for joining. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.